Good afternoon, everybody, here from Berlin. It's a very rainy day today. I'm coming from outside, just came here with the bicycle, so I'm still a little bit wet, but I'm happy being here and it's warm and cozy, and I'm sure I will have the opportunity to relax a little bit with you and discuss interesting things. I'm happy to welcome you all to the session with the title The Future of Migration and the question how a just European asylum policy could look like. And that we are not only talking about general topics, but also about a thing that is very relevant today. We can see when we look what happened today to the Pact camp on Lesbos that was evicted today. And I think so we are not only talking about a thing that is very relevant for us all in these years and the debates that we all know, but also when we look at what happened today on Lesbos. I'm happy to welcome here, on the one hand, Gerald Knaus. I will introduce you in a second, and on the other hand, Sophie Magennis. I will introduce you as well in a second. Welcome here to this session. Before I start, one little sentence concerning myself. My name is Andreas Audretsch. I'm policy fellow at the think tank Das Progressive Zentrum, and I'm working very close with this think tank in the recent years, and so I'm happy to have the possibility to present this session today to you. What are we going to do in the coming 90 minutes? We are starting with a conversation between our first two experts, and after that we are going into smaller breakout sessions, so you all will have the possibility to talk in smaller groups amongst about 5-6 people, just to have a closer look on the things that we discussed before that. And after that we're coming back here to the bigger session, and we're having two more interesting people, experts that are coming to us, Maria Kaldani and Erik Marquardt. I will introduce them later when we are coming to the reflection session in the end. So let's come to our first two speakers that are here in the beginning. I will introduce the two of you in a few sentences, and then afterwards we thought that it might be the most interesting thing if you're just starting a conversation amongst the two of you. I will interfere maybe with a question every now and then if I have the feeling that this is necessary, but feel free just to react to each other when we started the conversation. I start with Gerald Knaus. He is founding chairman of the European Stability Initiative, and he published extensively on the refugee crisis in the Aegean and the Central Mediterranean, as well as on corruption in the Council of Europe. And Gerald Knaus is considered as the person who actually invented the EU-Turkey agreement. And you, Gerald, you often mentioned as well that this agreement is far from perfect, but on the other hand, that you still haven't seen a different agreement that could be better, a solution that could be better. We'll enlarge on that just in a few minutes. And on the other hand, we have Sophie. She is Sophie Magennis. She is head of the Policy and Legal Support Unit at UNHCR Regional Representation for EU Affairs in Brussels. Welcome, Sophie. And in June this year, Sophie said that the EU must not be guided by the EU-Turkey agreement when it comes to the reforming of the asylum law. And you emphasized that Germany should work for a fair redistribution of asylum seekers in the EU. We are very much looking forward to what you have to say in more details concerning that. You all know that we are at the moment in a situation where the proposals of the EU Commission are very much in the discussion. Just to put it in one sentence, it's about a new system of distribution, a faster procedure at the external border of the EU, and a much stronger focus on the goal of quickly deporting people when no prospect of staying legally is there. So just to put it in one sentence, I'm sure you have much more to say on all of that. And to just get into the conversation, I would maybe ask Sophie in the beginning to tell us what needs to be done in that situation that we are at the moment with these discussions at European level to get just there where we thought we talk about in this session to a just European asylum policy, and how could this look like when we are done with these negotiations. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. A big question to start with. We have a unique opportunity, I think, now with the European Commission having published this new pact on migration and asylum last month to try and move beyond the difficulties and divisions that we've seen within the European Union that has prevented progress being made on reforming things within the European Union. So I think the first thing is that member states and everybody invested in this issue has to seize this opportunity and to try and make progress. In order to make progress, we're going to have to take a global approach to this issue. The Pact on Migration and Asylum is very much focused on the internal aspects of what's happening in Europe, which is very important. But we also need to take very much a global perspective. And that is because we're currently experiencing a crisis in displacement globally, but not necessarily within the European Union when it comes to the numbers of persons who are forcibly displaced. So I think we have to do much more to try and address the reasons why people are being forced to flee in the first place. We have nearly 80 million people forcibly displaced at the moment. 10 years ago, the figure was half that. So we have to deal with that. We have to invest much more in the countries that are hosting refugees. 85% of the world's displaced are hosted in developing countries. So we need much more investment there. And for those refugees who cannot find a solution in the country neighboring the one from which they fled, and let's keep in mind that 73% of all refugees are hosted in neighboring countries. For those that can't find protection there, we need to have much more resettlement, which is where countries invite refugees into their countries. Germany is a leader in this area when it comes to the resettlement of refugees for Europe. We need much more resettlement. Last year, we had just over 60,000 refugees resettled globally. That number is tiny. We need to see that greatly expanding. And then finally, when people arrive to the European Union, we need a well-managed system. I know that Gerald, together with UNHCR, we've been calling for this for many, many years. We need to have a well-organized, coherent European system. And that starts with proper management of borders, proper screening when people arrive, and fair and fast procedures that can identify those who are in need of protection and those who are not in need of protection. We've been talking about this for many years, and now it's really important that this is put in place. It's important so that people who have protection needs are quickly identified. It's also important to build confidence in our protection regime amongst all people in Europe. We have to make sure that people can feel confident that these systems are properly organized, that security considerations are looked at properly, and that protection needs are quickly identified. For people who are found in need of protection, we need to support their integration. There's been some very good practice on that in many countries in the European Union. There are other countries who frankly do not invest in integration, and that has to change. For people who are found not to be in need of protection, after a fair procedure and all of the safeguards applying, they need to be offered to return to their countries of origin with some assistance, to return voluntarily, and then support when they return so that that return is sustainable. And for people who are found not to be in need of protection and who do not wish to take up that offer of assisted return and who don't have another reason to remain, then we need to use the option of returning people to their countries of origin where there are no protection needs. That's important for the integrity of the protection system. And finally, I think that the point that's really crucial in all of this is that when the European member states get their act together and have a much better designed asylum system, they need to really support those host countries outside of the European Union that are doing the vast majority of the protection hosting. And I think that they can do that by making sure that the people who arrive to the European Union, they have their asylum claim looked at in the European Union. That was one of the underlying problems with the EU-Turkey statement, which was designed on the idea that asylum seekers would be transferred back to Turkey and that Turkey would look at their protection needs. We think a better system is for the European Union that receives comparatively fewer asylum seekers, that those cases be looked at in the European Union, and we quickly decide who needs protection and who doesn't need protection. So, in order to move ahead on these, I think we need member states to agree on some of the proposals that are there on the table, which we broadly welcome. And we need to make sure that the right safeguards are there, because we see the consequences, and I'm sure our next speakers will be able to talk from their experience of Greece, the dire consequences that when human rights safeguards are not put in place and not maintained, people suffer. And we need to make sure through this new system that human rights are put first and foremost, and that we have a system that recognizes those in need of protection, protects them, and works, a system that works and that people can have confidence in.
Thank you. Just react to that, Gerald. The floor is yours. We're happy to listen to you.
Yes, thanks a lot. Let me pick up globally. In the last 7 years, you don't hear me?
We didn't hear you, but now it's working. So maybe just start again and we try. At the moment, it looks good.
Okay, I try again. You give me a sign if it doesn't work. Why Europe matters. Let me pick up there globally. The refugee convention is drawn up one. In the 7 years, just Germany and its neighbors have given 40% of all international protection. I mean, with procedures in the world, with 2.7% of the world's population. Look at resettlement. The resettlement of Luxembourg alone has resettled.
It's difficult to understand. It's again difficult to understand.
You don't.
Like we hear parts of what you're saying, but of course we need to hear all of what you're saying to get your point in the end. Yes, I think let's try a third time, and otherwise I would maybe ask a question to Sophie, and then we continue later. Should we continue, the two of us, for a second, because I just see that you took out Gerald. So let's continue with you, Sophie, and I might just ask a question to continue for the moment. You describe the global view and the responsibility of the European Union in this global perspective. But let's look a little bit more in detail on what is happening in Europe at the moment, because we have the question of distributing the refugees that are coming to Europe, and that's actually the big question. How are we going to do this? What's the mechanism that we need to be actually able to fulfill our duties in this whole question? We have again problems with hearing you. So we can try again. I won't be able to do all of this by myself. I can ask questions, but we need people to answer. So, Sophie, can you hear me? That's something that works. So you can hear me, but I can't hear you. So that's the important thing that we actually need.
My apologies. Do you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes. Yes, we do hear you. So please just start again, and let's hope that it works.
Okay. Yes, the question that you ask on the distribution of asylum seekers within the EU, that's really been the issue where a lot of the political division has come from. And clearly we currently see, and I think this was the point that Gerald was beginning to make earlier, that the vast majority of the asylum seekers in the European Union are hosted by a very small number of countries, Germany being the country that hosts most of the asylum seekers who are coming in. There is currently a proposal on the table in the European Commission's new Pact on Migration and Asylum. And what that's suggesting is that when a country is experiencing difficulty in terms of managing the numbers of people arriving, that EU member states would be asked to relocate asylum seekers to their countries. Now, because there's been some resistance from some circles, there's an option. So member states can either relocate asylum seekers into their country, or in certain circumstances, they can opt to help the country where the asylum seekers are arriving to return those who are found not to be in need of protection. This is a concept called return sponsorship. And if after a period of 8 months, when they've been providing this support to return people, if they do not return, then they become obligated to relocate those persons to their country. So this is a little bit the sort of political solution that's on the table to try and resolve some of the difficulties around relocation.
How would you judge that? Yeah. How would you judge that? Is that a good way to go, or actually not?
We think that the best way that EU member states can express solidarity with each other is to relocate asylum seekers when another country is under pressure. So we do encourage all EU member states to participate in that activity, and to do so on a voluntary basis with a view to providing solidarity to other states. Solidarity is a cornerstone of the EU. It's in the founding treaties, and this is a real expression of solidarity. It also is very good for asylum seekers to be able to get better and quick access to protection. So we do call on other states to assist. But if the political reality is that some states are refusing to do so, we hope that they will participate in other measures to provide support, and that if a system can be developed that shows that relocation can be effective, then perhaps over time all member states might find it possible for them to participate in relocation. So we would like to see things moving in that direction.
So if I'm trying to make a kind of the counterpart to you and to ask some questions, if we say on the one hand we stop the EU-Turkey agreement, so that's not in place anymore, so people are coming to Greece, and then there are some countries that just refuse to take people in. How will this actually end? Will then countries like Germany or like Sweden, I hear some music.
I hear some music too. I'd stop now.
So it's stopped now. All right, we can continue. So if we don't have the EU-Turkey agreement anymore, and if some countries like Hungary, like Poland, we all know them, say that they are just not taking people, how can a system of relocation work in such a EU when more and more people are coming from Turkey, for example? What's the solution? What's the mechanism?
I mean, what you're describing is what's currently happening. At the moment, we don't have a proper system in place for relocation of asylum seekers from Greece, but we have countries like Germany and several other states, including France and others, stepping forward on a voluntary basis and accepting groups of unaccompanied minors, for example. So you know, it demonstrates that can work. The difficulty is that it's only a very small number of states that are doing that. So the solution, we feel, is that many, many more EU member states need to take part, and we need a common system for doing this with a standard set of arrangements. Because what we're doing is we're wasting a lot of time, that every time there's an exercise to relocate asylum seekers, we reinvent the wheel. We come up with a new system and new rules. We need to have one standard plan. We need to have as many EU member states participating as possible, ideally all of them, and then we move from there. But I do understand the question that you're asking, and I think that what we need to do is start with the countries who are willing to help, and try and build a broad base of support from there.
And coming to a perspective that is very much put forward from conservatives in Germany, for example, and of course in other countries as well, just to react to that, they are always saying it's also very important to have clear signals that people that are coming here can't just stay here. So would it be your opinion that, for example, Germany has to engage much more in deporting people that don't have a legal opportunity to actually stay here? And if we have this solution that other countries, for example, Hungary or Poland, can take a special responsibility in deporting people, that's, I think, the mechanism that we are just talking about on the European level. How could this work? Like, I imagine people being in Greece or people being in Germany and Poland taking responsibility for the deportation of these people. I just can't grasp the idea that's behind that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the detail has been fully fleshed out yet of what's proposed, but in essence, and this is, I suppose, more for the European Commission to explain, but what's currently proposed is that if you had an asylum seeker, let's say in Greece, and a country, another country offered to try and help their return if they're found to be not in need of protection, for example, in Greece, and then that country could provide bilateral support or provide some other supports to help with the return process. But really, I think one of the major elements that might help to come up with, let's say, a more functional process when it comes to return is a greater role for the European Union agencies. We have the European Asylum Support Office, and then we also have Frontex, which is the European Border and Coast Guard Agency, and both of these have roles to play. I think the really important aspect when it comes to return is we need to make sure that we have proper quality procedures, first of all, to clearly identify people who are in need of protection. Sometimes return procedures are not functioning properly because the decisions leading up to them are not done in a quality way. We need to be absolutely sure that anybody who might be subject to return procedures has had a really fair procedure, they've been treated well while they've been in the European Union, they've had their human rights properly respected, and they have been offered assisted voluntary return, first of all, and only then should the return procedure kick in. And at that point, you know, we feel that any people who might be subject to return, they need to have a lot of supports, both from European Union member states, but support when they do return home, meaning that when they return home, there are arrangements in place when they arrive, there's a financial package of support, there's support for them to reintegrate, and those returns are monitored because we need to make sure that any person who is returned, that those returns happen safely and that there is some sustainable support for people who are returned. So I think we have to be very careful and make sure that all of the safeguards are in place. And I think it's because some of those safeguards have been lacking and have been missing, and that there have been so many concerns and legitimate concerns that many organizations have had around the return process. You know, and for us, really, the focus needs to be on making sure that the common European asylum system works properly, that we have proper systems in place for people when they are arriving and good quality decisions with safeguards met all the way along.
Thanks for all of that. I just got the sign that Gerald is supposed to be back. So we tried to get him back in here. Ah, perfect. Is it, can we only hear you, or is it that we can see you as well?
No, I'm only on the phone.
Only on the phone, okay.
I was sent a phone number, so I called back in.
Okay, that's good to know, because then I'm not waiting for a picture of you, and we can just continue from here, just only seeing Sophie, but hearing you. And we just talked a little bit about the details of the EU proposal that's on the table at the moment and how this could work. And maybe we just go one step back and listen to your general opinion, and then maybe also on the details of the proposal that the EU Commission put forward. The floor is yours. Maybe you just start with what you did before.
Yes. Well, let me try to put it like this. Europe should really be an inspiration and a model for the world. This is where the Refugee Convention was created. This is one of the richest continents in the world. And yet, what we are seeing at this moment at all of Europe's external borders, if the rest of the world looks at this, it basically means the end of the Refugee Convention. We are seeing pushbacks. We are seeing people being beaten up at land borders. We are seeing people being pushed back at sea borders. We are seeing people treated and kept in centers which are worse in quality than the centers you would find in Pakistan or Iraq. And all of this despite enormous amounts of money that has been mobilized. There's been no shortage of money, no shortage of donations, no shortage of staff. So the conclusion from this is that these conditions that we see today are actually intentional. Now, why is that? Because in more and more European countries, leaders, governments, parliaments, and publics have concluded that the way to control irregular migration is to follow Australia. And what Australia has done since 2013, and it has stopped irregular arrivals across the sea, has been a combination of pushbacks and making clear that anybody who arrives has been put on some islands, Nauru or Manus in Papua New Guinea, where conditions have been such that more than 14 people committed suicide. The conditions are meant to deter. Now, in this situation, when we are looking at proposals from the Commission, when we are listening to proposals from UNHCR, my key question is, how do we recreate the necessary political dynamics that majorities in Greece, in Italy, in France, in Germany, and across the EU realize that there is another way that replaces the status quo? This is the debate we need. Now, the Commission proposed something that, on the surface, I think is very good. It says there should be fast asylum decisions, there should be fast return of those who do not need protection, and then there should be an orderly process of relocating those who get protection. The trouble is, the goals are good, but unless we are able to show somewhere that we are able to implement this, the member states at the EU's external border, Spain, Malta, Italy, Greece, will not accept those centers which the Commission proposes. Why? Because if we just say we want to be fast in asylum procedure, but we have it in a situation as we had in the last few years in Greece, or we have an asylum system as we've seen in the last few years in Spain or Italy, where it will take a very long time, then if we don't make a fast decision, it doesn't matter what the law says, people will be stuck for a very long time. If we make fast decisions but can't return anyone, just to give you the Spanish numbers last year, 2019, you had more than 5,000 people from Guinea arrive, more than 2,800 people from Ivory Coast. How many people were returned to Guinea or Ivory Coast? 10 to Guinea all year, 5 to Ivory Coast, despite the fact that almost nobody of them received protection in Spain. So if you can't return anyone, and return figures in Europe have never been lower than last year and this year, partly because of Corona, this is certainly going to be the same situation next year. Then again, you make fast decisions, but people will be stuck. And why would Spain, Italy, or Malta ever agree to create new Morias, new centers as we see on Samos or on Chios, where people arrive, they are then kept. Then we have asylum procedures which might or might not be fast, but anybody who is rejected will stay there as well. So I conclude the challenge is not that the goal is wrong. Fast and fair asylum, and I agree with UNHCR, that's a good idea. Returning those who don't need protection is essential. But unless we can prove somewhere on Lesbos, with returns to some West African or North African countries of origin, unless we can prove this works, nobody will believe it. Rightly so. And so the debate we need, if we hope to change the status quo, is a debate on the details. And that I don't hear at the moment, neither from the Commission, nor from UNHCR or IOM or NGOs. At the moment, we are all talking about the principles, but the reality is being set by organizations and governments that have given up on the idea of asylum and are pushing people back at our borders. And that is a disaster for global refugee protection.
All right, we take 15 more minutes because we had difficulties in the beginning, so we just continue a little bit. And I would just like to hand over to you, Sophie, if you want to react immediately on what Gerald said.
Yeah, I think Gerald is quite right that it's all about implementation. And the reality is that even after the events of 2015, many years were spent by member states discussing a package of reforms, the Common European Asylum System reforms that were published in 2016. Years were spent discussing those, and they were not finalized. This current pact that was published last month carries forward many of those proposals. So what we see is a constant discourse on the kinds of laws that need to be reformed, the kinds of principles that need to be reformed, the kinds of new strategies and new approaches that we need, but a real dearth of focus on implementation. So I fully agree that we need to be more serious about putting into practice systems that are going to work. And we feel that the current proposals on the table from the Commission, which take a different approach to the EU-Turkey statement, which take an approach that's based on making good decisions in the European Union, is the right one. And we know that member states are discussing the detail right now. They are meeting very frequently to discuss that detail. There's going to be an important meeting of Ministers of the Interior on the 13th of November to take stock of how those discussions are going. But we, together with IOM, are strongly calling on member states to move quickly in these discussions and to move towards implementing what's on the table so that we can quickly put in place something that works. And I also fully agree with what Gerald said about the need to effectively address the incidences of pushbacks, both at sea and on land. We've seen quite a few reports in recent days and in weeks about what's happening on the Croatia-Bosnia border and in the seas off Greece. These very credible reports of what is happening indicate that these practices must end. And, you know, that has to happen immediately. That should not wait for any proper system to come into place. I understand the political dynamics that Gerald is talking about, but these things have to end straight away. We've seen much more calls, particularly from the European Commission and others, for proper, effective investigations of what's happening. That hasn't been happening to date. So we need these practices to stop, and we do need to focus on early implementation. And, you know, the European Union has invested, and its member states, huge amounts of money in its two main agencies. You have the European Asylum Support Office based in Malta, and you have Frontex based in Warsaw. They have been given large budgets with many staff, and I think now it is the time to equip particularly the European Asylum Support Office with a new proposal that has to come forward to equip that to scale up and to do its job, and to turn implementation into the focus rather than discussions on proposals, which is what we've been doing for the last couple of years.
Can I respond to this?
Yes, go for it.
Okay, before I get to the bigger point, one thing I find puzzling, I don't understand why you keep saying the EU-Turkey statement says decisions should not be taken in the European Union. I mean, point one of the EU-Turkey statement, and I encourage lots of people to read it, because I find a lot of the debate is very far removed from what it actually says. Point one says explicitly, I quote, "Migrants arriving in the Greek islands will be duly registered, and any application for asylum will be processed individually by the Greek authorities in accordance with the Asylum Procedures Directive in cooperation with UNHCR." Stop quote. Now, the reason no returns happened to Turkey is precisely for this, that there was a requirement, as there should be, of processing asylum applications. The real problem of on the Greek islands was that this actually never led to decisions. So last year, we had 60,000 people arrive on the 5 Greek islands, 60,000, and you had less than 200 returns, which is 0.3%, a third of 1%, precisely because there was, and there should be, a requirement for processing, but it was never organized. So the challenge that exists for the EU's proposals now is not really adopting them. I mean, as I said, I don't think these proposals will be adopted for the simple reason that, and it's not Hungary or Poland that are the problem, that Italians and Spanish and Maltese will look at this and say, okay, you talk about fast procedures, how will this work? It didn't work in Greece. And in Greece, it was not for lack of money, it was not for lack of support from the European agency from EASO in Malta. There was lots of Frontex. It was lacking because the details, how you process applications and how you ensure that you have fair decisions within a few weeks, which is what the Commission proposes, the details were never worked out and the interest was never there to really make it work. Now, the problem then for today is we need to show today, and we don't need new EU laws. The laws have never been the problem. We need to show today that when people arrive and are rescued in the central Mediterranean, and we don't let them on their boats and risk their death, we bring them to shore quickly, and we bring them to Malta or to Italy, that then there is the ability on the spot to quickly decide if, and the biggest group this year have been Tunisians, if these Tunisians or Bangladeshis or people from Ivory Coast need protection. And we could do this now. Now, if we've made this decision, there is a second big problem, which is returning people who arrive who don't need protection. And the trouble is, at the moment, nobody is succeeding at this. Now, if you look at Spain, and I've quoted the numbers before, but if you look at Italy, if you look at Germany, Germany has a big diplomatic service. It's supposed to be a member state with a global reach, and the total number of people Germany managed to return last year to the whole world outside of Europe and including North Africa was less than 1,000. Now, if you're Malta, if you're Spain, if you're Italy, if you're Greece, and you see the Commission proposal, and you see that Germany, France, Sweden, and others can't return those who have been rejected after a full and fair and long asylum procedure, then you ask yourself, what happens to those who are rejected in those centers? And so the question we need to have today is, how do we answer that question? Now, the answer is clear. We need interests of the other countries, either the countries of origin or safe third countries where one can return those who do not need protection. We need their interests to help. Unless they have an interest, unless Tunisia has an interest to take back its own citizens quickly so that the sign is made, don't get into these boats and go to Europe, because your chance of getting protection as a Tunisian is very low, and you risk your life, and you will be returned quickly. The same should be the signal from Spain, and the same should be the signal for those who do not need protection not to come to Greece. Now, that requires proving today in the central Mediterranean, in the western Mediterranean, in the Greek islands, how we can make this work. And for this, we don't even need a new law. We don't need a package. There is no obstacle to this, except the lack of a strategy, the lack of will, the lack of serious focus. And the end result is that in more and more countries around Europe, governments are concluding that they have a very easy way to stop irregular migration, which is simply to ignore existing legislation. The pushbacks are not accidental. We've had them for years at the Croatian-Bosnian border. We've had them at other land borders in Europe. They will continue. That's the problem. And in the end, I fear even European courts, and we've already seen it in the court in Strasbourg, which has ruled earlier this year that the pushbacks at the Spanish enclaves in North Africa have been fine, which has been an extraordinary statement or extraordinary judgment, except that these are the kinds of judgments we are used to from Australian high courts and from the US Supreme Court, which have all come round to justifying pushbacks in the end. So I think we have a race with time and a political race. We need to prove quickly that the Refugee Convention, the need to save and rescue people at sea, the need to treat them decently, that all of this can be combined with control, that fast and fair asylum procedures work. And actually, the only way we can achieve this is if we learn from the EU-Turkey statement, because that saw us support refugees in a neighboring country like never before. It enshrined the right to check the asylum application of everyone, which was there before. This was not touched. But it then said those who are not needing protection in the EU can be returned. And that we never managed. That we need to do again. And that, in fact, is why the only alternative to the chaos in the Aegean today is to draw the lessons, reach new agreements with neighboring countries, and then put in place the resources we need to actually make the right to asylum more than just something that is written on paper, something that people in Lesbos and Samos and Chios and elsewhere in Europe can actually experience.
So before we come to the last round, you will get the possibility to answer just in a second, Sophie. I would like to add one, which are currently a place of great suffering and horror. How can this be justified? And what can UNHCR and others do to stop this? So the first question is, do we need this? And the second question is, how could it look like actually? And I would like to ask the two of you for maybe a final statement, not too long if that's possible, and maybe combine this question from the audience with your last words on this conversation.
Okay, shall I go first?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll deal with the two elements there. It's really important that we learn the lessons from the EU-Turkey statement. And the first thing is to understand the difference between the EU-Turkey statement of March 2016 and what's currently proposed by the European Commission. The EU-Turkey statement basically said that people arriving to the Greek islands from Turkey would go through a procedure in Greece in order to find out if Turkey was a safe country for them to be transferred back to, so that Turkey could look at their case to see whether they need protection or not. So when I was saying before that the EU-Turkey statement indicated that Greece wasn't taking the decisions, what I mean by that is the whole idea of the EU-Turkey statement was all of the people arriving to the Greek islands would be sent back to Turkey because Turkey was safe for them and that Turkey would do the determination. Now, the reality is...
That's not what it says. And that's not what was done in 4 years. I don't understand why you keep saying this. This is just not true.
If I can respond, the EU-Turkey statement indicated that Greece would need to bring in an inadmissibility procedure that was brought in the law in Greece.
In the EU asylum procedures directive.
It was
the EU law has this already.
Okay, well,
I don't
change,
understand why.
So maybe we let Sophie make her point,
I
and then
finish.
you get
Yes.
the possibility to respond.
Okay, so I mean, this is a factual question that can be checked anyway. But essentially, the EU-Turkey statement, if you read it, it's just a press release. It's quite short. It basically says people who are arriving to the Greek islands should be transferred back to Turkey. Now, the reason that the system didn't work is because the decisions that were taken in Greece, which said you can now be sent back to Turkey because Turkey is safe, those were challenged in the courts. Because it's a very difficult thing to prove if another country is safe for a person to be transferred back to. That's problem number one. Problem number two is that we've had some political difficulties between those two countries. And from time to time, the idea that people could be transferred from Greece back to Turkey, it hasn't worked. So people have not been transferred back. The essential difference is, and this is the reality of the essential difference. What's on the table at the moment is the European Commission is suggesting to EU member states, when asylum seekers arrive in the European Union, let's decide whether they need protection or not. Let's look at the essence of their asylum claim. Let's try and focus on that. If they need protection, they stay in the EU. If they don't need protection and they get a final decision, then they're returned back to their country of origin. That's a very different thing than the EU-Turkey statement and the proposals that came after that statement, which were about using this idea on a mandatory basis that whenever somebody could be returned to another country outside of the EU to look at their protection claim, that's what should happen. We call that approach responsibility shifting. It's basically saying to other countries, you look at whether this person needs protection or not, you decide. What we're saying as UNHCR is, let the EU assume that responsibility. The EU member states should examine the merits of an asylum claim. Does this person need protection or not? If they do, grant it in the EU. If they don't, offer return. So that's the essential difference between the two models. And I think it's quite clear that the current proposals on the table have departed from this idea of looking every time somebody arrives to the EU to see whether they can be shifted back to another country to look at the merits of their claim. So for us, those are the essential differences between the two systems. And in terms of the question from the audience member, I think what we need to see is a focus on quickly deciding whether somebody is in need of protection or not. So quickly, within a matter of weeks or months. And if they need protection, they need to be integrated in the country where they are or relocated onto another country where they can get that protection. That's a very different thing than the old way of doing things, where attempts were made to transfer back people who were still asylum seekers to another country to determine whether they need protection or not. And if they had been found to need protection, to get it in that other country. So that's the difference of approach. It's much more about the EU assuming responsibility for determining the needs, protection needs of people arriving here, rather than trying to get another third country to do it. And let's look at this in the global sense. I mean, Turkey is a huge hosting country. Yeah, it's better for the European Union to look at the protection cases of people who arrive, because the European Union receives comparatively so much less than other regions.
Thanks, Sophie. So the last answer comes from you, Gerald, and I would like to ask you as well to make it as short as possible.
All right. Well, I recommend anyone, it's very easy on the web. It's a historic statement because it's no longer in force. Turkey has basically called it off. But anybody can look at the EU-Turkey statement on the website. You go to point 1, and if you read only the first sentence, you will think that Sophie is right. But if you read 5 sentences down, you will read that the Asylum Procedures Directive of the EU continues to apply. That is important, because that means that this press release, and it was not a law, it was a press release, never changed existing EU law. And EU law has this provision that you can check whether somebody's asylum claim is admissible. Now, Turkey doesn't have a credible asylum system at the moment. So the only people who could be sent back under this provision were Syrians who don't need an asylum procedure in Turkey, who get the status of protection in Turkey immediately, as more than 3.5 million have and had for many years. So the important thing here was that you can't return Afghans under this inadmissibility. You can't return Pakistanis. For those you needed to do the full procedure, even in recent years. This was supposed to happen, but despite 60 EASO caseworkers on the islands summer 2019, despite a huge amount of money, that bit, the real assessing of who needs protection in Europe and who doesn't, a full asylum procedure, took an enormous amount of time. And so instead of returning anyone, the number of returns actually was less than 200 last year. Instead of returning them, people were all moved to the mainland after being kept on the islands for many, many months of waiting. Now, the trouble is, if this is the experience here, with a lot of resources and the neighboring country that says, we would take everyone that you determine you can return, how are these centers, which are at the center of the Commission proposal, going to work in the next 5 years anywhere in Europe, when we have no agreements with neighboring countries and no countries of origin that in recent years have been prepared to quickly take back their citizens? And if we can't answer this question, this proposal will not work. It will either leave the status quo, which is a huge threat because every day we see violations of international law and people get used to it. We will either have the status quo, or we will see, in fact, an open embracing of pushbacks. The Prime Minister or Chancellor of Austria has said openly for years that we should follow the Australian model. Hungary has been saying this. UNHCR has not succeeded in changing the Australian model in Australia, despite trying for years. And I fear that in Europe, if this reform fails, we will in fact see Europe turn its back to the Refugee Convention and embrace pushbacks, which would be tragic.
All right, thank you. Thank you for this controversial discussion to the two of you. There is a lot to be reflected on now in the coming minutes in the second part of our session today. For the moment, for everybody that is joining us on Zoom, you will be transferred into breakout session rooms, and there you will have 10 minutes more or less to discuss what we've just heard. And after these 10 minutes, we are coming back here and then we continue reflecting on that together. So thanks a lot again to Sophie and to Gerald.
Thank you.
So welcome back here. I hope you started your reflections in your breakout sessions. We want to continue with the reflections here in the broader room with the broader audience and with two more guests. And before I start introducing them, I would like to ask all of you to ask questions. You could just put the questions in the chat, and we'll come back to these questions later after we start reflecting on what we've heard before the breakout session in our smaller group here in our room. I will start with introducing our two new guests. We have with us Maria Kaldani and Erik Marquardt. Maria is head of human development at the Home Project. She's a social worker working with refugees since 2004 in accommodation on the one hand and integration projects. She has been working in the social department of the Greek Council for Refugees and was project manager for European funded refugee projects. And since 2008, she has been a member of the UNHCR working group. So welcome to you. Nice to have you here. And our second guest is Erik Marquardt. Erik is a German member of the European Parliament for the Green Party. And as photojournalist, Erik made several trips along the escape routes to Europe. And he took part in the sea relief operation on the Mediterranean Sea. Just recently, Erik was in Moria visiting the refugees there. So both of them can give us a very close view on what is happening in Greece, what is happening on the ground. But of course, they are also very much engaged into the political questions. To start our reflection, I would maybe just hand over to Maria and ask you to just tell us what you took out of the discussion that we had earlier and the insights that were given to us by Gerald and Sophie. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. I mean, it was really amazing hearing about things that I have been living the last 15 years and how this has been changed all the time. The amazing thing that I keep as a notice is that since 2004, as you can imagine, I have lived through many changes of the asylum law with the people that I work with. I mean, I'm talking about the refugees and the asylum seekers in Greece. What I'm keeping from this discussion is that we had two experts discussing about the EU-Turkey agreement, and both of them, in these 10 lines that was this press release, they could read so many other things, so how hard it is to implement it actually. That was my initial response. I mean, these few lines of the press release, how they can affect all these people and how we can translate them in implementation. We had two people discussing what this means, and 3 lines after, it means something else. So it was really difficult, the implementation, and it is still. And then I was thinking about all this being said all these years about the solidarity between the EU members, and I'm keeping what both the two speakers they said. We don't have a lack of laws. We actually have a lack of being sure that we implement the laws that we vote or that we want to be released in a way. So I'm keeping the fact that, of course, we can have only the people that they need protection within EU, but at the same time, we need to protect as EU responsibility the people that they are not refugees, according to the asylum law, but they need to get back where they get back, because no one, and that's my social worker's vision, way of seeing things, no one is leaving their country just because they don't have something else to do. So it's always a difficult decision to be made. So we need, as EU, to have the responsibility in order to avoid to implement a schedule like the Australian model of keeping people outside. If still is this the mentality of Europe, if we still want to provide solidarity to people all around the world, that we need also for the people that they are not within the asylum law, how they're getting back. So the return should be, as it's been mentioned from Sophie, with specific procedures to be sure that people that are getting back safe, that they're being supported, and the fact that we monitor the procedures that they're getting back. This is very important. Not just to avoid them coming back, because we have seen all these years that measures like pushbacks or like this, they don't keep people away. When someone needs to be protected or not, someone needs to be saved, we'll pass through all this, and we'll do that again and again. So just to add in this difficult decision, I don't know if I am adding that, I will add also the pandemic, and I will also add the environmental issues, since today we had an earthquake in Izmir, which actually had destroyed in Samos, which is the nearby island. So when we live in something like this, I don't think that we can really say that we can keep people away or that we can keep people outside our country or EU. So we need actually to have laws that they can be all around in a way, remembering that the one thing really affects the other. Something that is happening right now in Somalia will for sure influence us in about 3 or 2 years. Regarding the procedures that they have to be fast, I don't know how fast they can be, but the thing is that we need to be sure that we have fast procedures, but we also have be sure that we have the quality of the procedures. It doesn't mean anything if you have fast procedures if you don't have quality, either to decide that they're going to gain asylum in Europe or not. So I don't know if I'm really helping in a way, but it's really, it was really a pleasure hearing both sides, and I'm keeping that in a way, how you can implement something which is in 5 lines and how you can implement a law if they don't have details. That's from my point of view.
Thanks, Maria. So, like handing over to Erik right away, what's your response?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for the invitation. I have some responses. I try to keep it a little bit more general because, of course, we can discuss about the small details of the EU-Turkey deal and maybe we find some answers. But in general, I think if we look on the asylum politics of the European Union in the last years, it's not a question of some details. It's a question, what is your general approach? And that is also the question I had when I read the Commission proposal for the new Pact. And I was questioning myself, and I was also questioning myself after the discussion we heard some minutes ago. Aren't we in a situation where politicians trying to convince you that there is some gold in a pot at the end of the rainbow? So I'm this new Pact proposal. So for example, if you want to have solidarity in the European Union, if you want to have efficient asylum procedures, if you just want to respect human dignity, there is no need for a new pact for asylum and migration. There is just the need for political will to respect the fundamental rights of people and get things done. And I think that is a basic problem we have at the moment, that many people are focusing on all the details. And if the question is, of course, it's a big question if you had an inadmissibility procedure at the external borders, if people are treated in border procedures, if people are detained there, if people live like they do now after the fire in Moria on a place which was used for practicing shooting of the army, basically polluted space close to the sea, where basically it's an area which is flooded every winter, and there are tents without any protection. And now we're talking about a winterization of tents after we recognized that it's not good to have so many people in Moria. We now have so many people in tents close to Moria, and there is what I want to say is, in the end, it's hard work, and it's hard work which should be based on the political will to get things done. And I just have the feeling that the search for a pot of gold in the end of the rainbow, called New Pact for Asylum and Migration, where in the end everything will be fine, there will be no pot of gold. There will be just a way to produce some better situations by hard work, and that is what we can do now without the new pact. That's the beginning. And then I have some maybe some, is it insulting? I don't know. If I say some insults or something, it's due to my language problems in English. I don't want to criticize somebody personally, but if I talk about the European governments and the pushbacks and the torture, for example, happening at the external border at Croatia, where basically there's a systematic torture of people. People are getting they sent back naked. Yeah, there's sexual abuse from Croatian border police guys, and that's not and I have to say it very clear, it's not like something I just thinking that is happening, but there are thousands of reports of very serious, very serious fundamental rights violations by border police officers. Okay, where we have basically torture from European border police guys and European border and Coast Guard agency Frontex, who is not knowing something about it and who is also complicitly part of this situations, like we learned last week. There's strong evidence about that, and there I would say the answer is not very complicated. I wrote down, if you are in the European government, don't behave like a disgusting moron who does not care about values and fundamental rights. Maybe that sounds strong, but I think it's very important for us to understand that fundamental rights. It's not something where we have a need for new laws or something. It's just we need some people who care about the situation. And give me maybe 3 more sentences. I think it's important to also stop the obsession with returns, because just to return people who are just returned without a perspective, they will come back, and that's also a problem we saw in Moria. I think to respect the rules we have is in general not a bad thing, and I listened very carefully also to Gerald Knaus, not the first time, and he's absolutely right that we don't need new rules if we are not in a situation where we can trust European governments to have at least a little bit respect of the rules. But let's stop here. I have some more points, but we can also talk in the discussion.
We'll come back to that, I'm sure, above all because I was just told that Maria left us. She's not with us anymore, but we are trying to get her back. So in the meantime, I will just ask one more question to you, Erik. When we bring together what Maria said and what you said, then I would be very interested in your opinion on the question. Maria said we need fast procedures and we need quality procedures, these 2 questions. And earlier we talked a lot about the question of the European procedures, and you can call it a new pact or you can call it a new agreement or whatever. You can also say we don't need this new agreement, but it always still comes down to the question, what kind of fast procedures and what kind of quality procedures? Like, do we need the procedures in Greece, for example, in Italy, or do we need a new system of transferring people to other countries? Like, how would the system look like that you imagine?
I think the approach of the Commission is very clear. So people from countries who have an approval rate less than 20% will have to stay at the border and they will receive a border procedures. Border procedures are, and I'm the rapporteur of the implementation report on border procedures for the European Parliament. Border procedures are, every time you look in the member state and see a border procedure, it's linked to detention. So everybody who comes there will be detained no matter where he is from. And there are some exceptions. Children under 12. Children under 12 will not be detained, also if they are with their families, and unaccompanied minors will also not be detained in the proposal of the Commission. But basically the approach of the Commission is to detain many, many people at the European external borders, and that's not the way I think we should deal with people who are in need of international protection or who are at least in need of rule of law based procedure to find out if somebody is in need of international protection. So a system which I would prefer is to have relocation centers at the external borders where you can register people, have security checks, humanitarian aid, where they have access to doctors, access to lawyers, also independent lawyers. And then you can use the power of the European member states to just relocate the people very fast and have a fair and fast procedure, which will be much faster because you have lots more of capacities and also situation where you can deal with a huge amount actually in the end if you use the power of 27 member states, huge amount of asylum requests without having a crisis, and then you can have the asylum procedures in the member states based on a European system where in every member state you have at least some minimal standards for the asylum procedures that would work, that would be an answer to the situations we saw the last years with having overcrowded camps at the external borders, because the proposal of the Commission will just lead to more Morias. Also, if they the Commission said no more Morias, no, that's not the situation we will have after the new pact. We will just create huge camps at the external borders, and that is not a solution to the challenges we face at the moment.
Welcome back, Maria. Nice that you found your way back into our session here. I will just put the question that Erik just answered to you as well, or give the question to you as well. You said we need fast procedures, quality procedures. Erik just said that we could have in Greece, for example, centers where we have doctors, where we have lawyers, where we just look after the people and organize the transfer into other countries. When I got this right, or when I get this right, then the Greek government is doing like right the opposite. They don't want these kind of centers, but they fear to have pull factors. They are trying to set a bad example to keep people out and away from Greece. Is that what you see on the ground, and what do you think of what Erik just proposed?
I'm just saying that what I see on the ground is not only in Greece, but in general. That's what I'm saying. We need to remember Lampedusa, all this. I mean, it was a EU policy for many years. I don't think that I disagree with Erik. I just need to be sure that we have really clarified some things. The age assessment procedures, I'm talking about unaccompanied minors, has not been clarified yet. I mean, the fact that some basic things, like the reception conditions, like how the procedures are going to be made, the fact that they still remain to the EU members to decide how they're going to implement this, in my opinion, and how we see it on the ground, creates all the lack between the lines. And actually that's when we have the human rights that they cannot be enforced, as Erik said. That's what I mean about saying being clear what we want to do and how we want to do it. Of course, the mentality behind that has to be, as Erik said before, at the part that I was there, that we need to protect people and solidarity. But we need also to be clear that everything that we do in one part of Europe is exactly the same that is happening at the other part of Europe. Or else we create actually a market of people that they are traveling around, not because they have nothing else to do, but because they're trying to seek for protection. So I don't know if I'm really answering your question, but I'm just saying that we need to clarify some things. We cannot just leave it in a good goal, you know. Usually the European directives, they're the willingness. They're never bad, the European directives, but actually, as far as we have every EU member to have to pass it through their own local laws, as we had for the relocation. I mean, I was in Greece when the relocation was happening, like in 2016. There are different criteria. As Sophie said, you have like treats of relocation. Every country puts their own criteria. This cannot be a common policy of protection and a common policy of asylum. Because we have to face like the environmental refugees or the pandemic refugees, or how we're going to call them. That's what I mean.
I would like to take in one question from the audience. And we heard it earlier from Gerald as well. The question, what do we need to get to a point where countries actually do change the way of behaving and do change something? I will read the question to you. How do you think we can convince the European member states to behave with the political will to respect human dignity? That goes to Erik first, because you mentioned the question of human dignity. So we are on a very abstract level, but it comes down to what Maria also said with the procedures, fast and with quality. So what's the incentive for countries in Europe, let's say the countries like Germany, that are basically more willing but not there where we would like them to be, but also above all countries like Hungary or Poland? What incentives do they need?
Yes, it's already on. Okay, I think it's good to have some incentives, especially for regions, cities, maybe countries in Europe who are in solidarity with people, actually, not in solidarity with a crazy system for returns. I don't think that it's necessary to have this obsession with returns and call it solidarity. But in the end, it's necessary that there are incentives, not for the people who are just not in solidarity with human rights at all. It's impossible to have incentives for cities, regions, and countries who want to be in solidarity. So why is it possible that Hungary receives 5% of their GDP from the European Union, but saying no to they will not relocate one refugee in the next decade. That's their approach. And I think that in the end, not the people on the ground in Hungary who also have a difficult situation, especially in COVID times, but the government should feel that they maybe lose the control about the European money, because it cannot be approach of being a member of the European Union, just get the money to the Hungarian government, which says, oh, Brussels is so bad, but distributes the European money and say we are the kings. That's not working. So I think you should talk about maybe stealing the control money from the Hungarian government and give it directly to the people. That's one thing. And the second thing, can also tell 10 ideas, but the second thing I want to tell is make migration boring again. I think it's very necessary to not have a talk and discussion about migration like it's the biggest crisis we have at the moment, that some people are arriving at the external borders of the European Union. According to UNHCR, there are approximately 60,000 people arriving irregularly at the moment, like the first 10 months to Europe in 2020. And that's also because of COVID, but the last 3 years, it was approximately less than 200,000 people arriving, according to UNHCR numbers, irregularly at the external borders. And that's not a crisis, it's just a thing where we can deal with. And if we, although it is not a big crisis, have the feeling that every shipwreck in the Mediterranean and every rescue operation with 27 survivors needs 27 ministers who are talking about the situation, of course we have a feeling in the European public that there is a crisis and we have to react to that. But if it's a situation where migration is a little bit more boring again, and where we just get things done, politicians who are just doing their work and have fast, fair procedures for asylum seekers, then I think that's the most important thing also for the discussion in the European member states and the fight against racism and right-wing populists also.
So I'll take this at the same time as the final words from Erik, and we'll hand over once more to Maria, like giving you the same question. Of what are on the one hand incentives, and I think Erik brought another thing next to it, like using some force, at least like when it comes to questions of money and distribution of money. What would you think, what is the way forward, like to bring other countries and politicians to a point where they take responsibility? And maybe you can answer this question and at the same time combine it with your final words to the session.
Thank you. I was just thinking that we need to go back as that in order to convince people why not. That's what we are looking for, is that we need to remind that Europe is becoming very old. So we actually need these people to be here. I need these people. I'm 40. I need these people so I can be continuing to having what my country is providing to me. I'm Greek. So I'm just saying that we need to see that from this procedure also, because I don't know if the money will cost it at one point, but we need to see what is what I'm going to win in my everyday life. That's what people, they need to understand. And that's what we have seen, what I have seen in my life, in my working every day in shelters or in apartments that refugees are living in. When people, they can understand that this is not something that is against me, but actually can give back to me things. Could be money for the local market, could be people that they're really smart and they can do things. We have the example of Antetokounmpos here in Greece that is well known all around the world, and suddenly everybody was Greek because Antetokounmpos was brothers, they were from Greece and they were refugees. So we need to remind ourselves what we really have to gain in this matter, in everyday life of every person. I think that's how things will be changed. Slowly, but they will be changed. That's how it's been changing in our reality every day. I don't think there is another way of doing that. And in a more technical way, we need to remember that they are young people and they're trying to have a better life, but they actually want to invest at the countries that they're coming. That's my image in everyday life, because I'm seeing people that they are 16 and 17 years old or younger than that, and that would be my conclusion. And actually for them and with them, we need to have a future. There is no other choice. You cannot just don't have future. So no matter what is going on, they will have to step ahead the next day, the next month, and to create their dreams again and to have their dreams to come true. So you don't have a choice. You must have a future. So you cannot just say, I will just stop.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you to the two of you, Erik and Maria, for being with us and reflecting on all of that together with us. I feel a little bit bad because actually I would have loved to take more questions from the audience. We actually didn't take a lot of questions now, but we took more time, and still time is over already and we have to proceed. So this time we can't take more questions from the audience, and for me it's just like thanking you for being with us and spending the time to reflect on what we've heard before. Before
Thanks.
we end...
Maybe you can also send the questions to Instagram or something, then we can answer or reply later.
We'll try to hand over the questions to you, and then we see whether we can find another way to answer this later on. Before we end this session, I have some announcements to make. It was just like given to me, and I will try to bring it to you. First thing, there is an evaluation to this session, so please take 2 minutes of your time and fill in the evaluation form that will be posted in the Zoom chat. Now, take this time, it's important for us that we can see what you think of the session and do it better the next time. And the second thing, we'll take a break of 30 minutes now, and then we'll start the last session of the Inauguracy Conference 2020 at 5 p.m. Central European time, when you're somewhere else, not in Europe. And the title of the last session is "The America We Deserve: A Radical Vision of a Post-Trump Democracy." And with us will be Martina Guzman, Diego Rivas, Andrea Römmele, and Emily Schultheis. These 4 people will be with us then. For the moment, thanks to the two of you again, thanks to Sophie, thanks to Gerald, and thanks to all of you that have been with us in the audience. I hope we brought some insights to you, and then stick with us, and we'll continue at 5 o'clock. Thank you.